I will be available if anyone has questions up at the front of the room.
Could I talk to you about like defense?
Yes.
Okay. So like I came up with an algorithm that basically takes the team's averages and compares it to like what they scored in that match, like added together for that line. Would you recommend taking a team's like maxes and then comparing it to that, or a team's undefended values? Like how do you recommend?
I think you want to compare average undefended versus defended.
Okay.
You could look at max, just be consistent of what you're comparing with, so you don't get cross comparisons.
Okay.
But again, their average undefended might be based on a sample size of like 4 or 5.
Yeah, that's my problem with it.
And that's what
average. Yeah, that was basically the only question. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you for coming.
So I just want to know your opinion on the 3 offensive versus 2 offensive, 1 defense.
I wish I could have gotten to this in the presentation. 3 offense, I think, is only valuable when you can completely overpower the other alliance. I think that if you are not certain that you can overpower them, then you need to throw a defense spot back there. My concern is if I run 3 offense and they run a defender at me, I've got 4 robots on my side of the field now, and there's a little bit of chaos, and they have 2 robots that are undefended. So picture, this is Saturday in the elimination rounds. What division are you in?
I'm in Darwin.
Who are the top 2 teams in Darwin?
Shaker, I would agree, Shaker, and seniors, 1690s.
Okay, so if you were playing against Shaker in 1918, and you want to run 3 offense to try and say, okay, let's raise our scoring potential over theirs, and they send a defense robot on to your side of the field, that means Shaker is undefended, and 1918 is undefended. That is terrifying for whatever amazing alliance of 3 scorers you put together. However, if that alliance isn't Shaker in 1918, and is robots that have 4 or 5 less cycles than those, so like if in the 4-5 matchup, maybe 3 offense there is effective. But once you're playing these higher powered alliances, it is risky. 4 robots, if both alliances go 3 offense versus 3 offense, then it's like, you know who's gonna win before the match. It's an execution match, it's a practice match, it's recycle rush.
Yeah.
So if you think you can win that 3 offense versus 3 offense, then I can see why you would do that, because it's recycle rush. But if you're in a position where you're not certain, then you're in trouble. And that's a point where I think you should set a defender. I don't know, the field is tight. How many of you are on drive teams here? When you're out there on the field, you know how crowded it is. And when you add a 3rd and a 4th robot over there, especially one of them who's trying to get in your way, and one of them who may not be trying to get in your way, but they're your partner but still gets in your way, yeah, it can be a lot. So that's my answer to 3 offense. There's a place and a time for 3 offense, qualifying matches especially, because it can really help getting that rocket done. However, in elimination matches, unless you feel that you have a significant firepower advantage, and you can figure that out by looking at your scouting data, you might want to send a defender.
Right.
But some of the best strategists in the world, including my old boss, Paul Copioli, swear by the 3 offense strategy. You know, and it got them all the way to Minute Maid Park. So who knows? I think it works for them because 3310 and 254 had the firepower advantage on every other alliance in Houston, because so many of the divisions got burned and the top teams didn't see number 1. You know, like if 1678 and 118 were together and they tried to run 3 offense against that, and with their triple climb, they would have lost for sure. That's my opinion. We will see how it plays out this weekend. Who else has questions for me? Here. Hi.
I have a very general question.
All right, Drew, what's your general question?
My general question is that, like, would you recommend in the season spending more time, like, trying to get perfecting an autonomous automation? Because, like, that will work every time versus, like, your drivers. Like, your drivers mess up. Something like that happens, right? Like, human error, like, reduce that chance. Or would you recommend spending more time actually drivers?
I would spend more time doing driver practice, because you can always fall back on driver practice. While programming, if something goes wrong, it goes wrong. There's less chance of failing by driver practice than there is failing by trying to achieving the programming goal. However, this is the first year where I would say that the teams who are the best teams in the world this year are not driving their robots when they're scoring. They're pointing the robot at the rocket and the limelight's taking over. And so that makes a huge difference.
We had a mechanism that, like, you really held the button and it would drive up to loading system. Rather, it would actually be quite accurate. And we have a state machine for we have like a hatchback camera that's triggered by like limit switches.
Yep.
So basically, when you touch it, it literally grabs it. So like on touch grabs, right?
Yeah.
So like it was actually working really accurately, but on the field, when he got really close, at very, very close distances, like that smudge really like screwed up last second. That really made it hard.
But
like our drivers were practice.
I will say this, in general, automating functions is great. I think the amount of teams who are like, when they're trying to climb, it's like they're playing a video game, hitting a combo like back, C, uppercut, whatever. I like the climb to be on one button, and that sort of level of automation is great. But I love that First has now designed a game this year where using vision is useful, and that we have the vision tool in the Limelight. And like, I don't work for them or anything, but like, it is worth every penny. Hey man, talk to the Limelight guys, give them some advice, and they're good stuff. Awesome.
So for you were speaking about putting your defense on second
Yeah.
scorer. Do you really think that the reward of denying the points to the second top scorer is going to be more than the points that the first scorer is going to make?
It's a case by case basis. So there are some teams that just play through defense amazingly, and there are some teams who aren't. I call them the paper tigers. And so if you identify that you are playing a team who is a paper tiger, so they put up huge scoring numbers when they're undefended, they've been killing rockets on their own. However, when they're defended, they've gone down to nothing. Those are the teams that you want to defend.
Okay.
And so, yeah, like, it seems crazy to not defend 2056. But I mean, that's how we won provincials. And it seems crazy to not defend 1323. But sometimes you need to, like, if you were to try and defend 1323, they're just going to swerve around you. Like, why not go after 973, who can't swerve like magic, and see what can happen. But it is a tough call. I'm not saying it's an absolute rule that you should defend the weaker one. However, I think too many teams automatically go for the higher scoring one, thinking that that's the way to do it.
Yeah, so it's just tie back into some of the match scouting too, because if you're seeing what teams are scoring when they're defended, then you know who's the better one to defend, because who's probably more points.
Exactly what we were talking about, and looking at those differentials, and so that's why it's important to incorporate that data into your scouting.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that wouldn't it be more valuable just to make sure that your scouts pay attention to whether or not the robots are paying or scoring a lot are being defended or not?
I think you should have a checkbox for every team when you're scouting them, and that checkbox should be defended or undefended. And knowing that knowledge, and then having to have two streams of data, undefended averages and defended averages, may tell more of the story. And it just applies so much in this game. Yeah.
First off, we get back to 2017. You said after we released it, you said our robot was one of your favorite robots.
Yes, I did.
Our process that year was fall.
Yep.
We tried. Let's do years and let's do the fastest team out there, and it really paid off.
Absolutely. I mean, that's another great example. Like the 2017 game, fuel had a lot of value to it, and it was really important at the highest levels of play. But if your reasonable goal was just to win a regional and get to Worlds, be on Alliance at Worlds, you didn't need to do any fuel, and you could really dominate that game by just scoring gears. You guys, 610 was another one who were just blazing fast and prioritized that way. And we saw how many teams had shooters and then never used them and just did gears. Imagine if they never built that shooter, and the opportunity cost that was expended, and what they could have done with their gear scoring in terms of the best gear scores. Why were they best? Practice time. Practice time, man. Driving matters. So, yeah.
And another question. Last year, we decided to focus more on our scoring. At what point do you value endgame?
I mean, you got to look at the ranking system and see how it plays and see how much endgame matters for the ranking system this year. And being able to do one ranking point on your own is huge. Is huge, huge, huge. So I think it's important. It all just flows within your game analysis. You can't just isolate endgame because it's at the end. I think you need to look at the amount of points that you can achieve in endgame and compare that to the amount of points you can achieve in a match. Look at the cycle time analysis and take 3 average robots, figure out how many points they're scoring. Take 3 elite robots, figure out how many points they're scoring, and then do endgame as a percentage of that to set how much value you want to put on endgame, if that makes sense. But also look at it in the context of overall match score for how much it's contributing to your 2 ranking points and ranking point. So here, for example, a 12-point endgame is contributing 80% to 1 ranking point, while 12 points, if you were going to say that you needed probably 70 points to win 85% of your matches this year, then you'd look at what 12 points is in terms of 70%.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah,
He freaked out when he saw that. They really liked the robot in 2017.
that's awesome. All right, who else is next?
Earlier, you talked about like leadership and how they have to like abandon ideas if there's like a better one,
Yeah.
even if it's their own. As like a possible like future leader in our team, I was wondering how do you like keep with the ideas that count, and how do you not become like a robot communist?
Well, I wouldn't say you'd be a robot communist. You'd be a robot dictator. I could teach you a lot about communism.
Well,
Yeah, no, let's not associate communism with dictators naturally. I think we talked about it. I mentioned it. It's about building consensus, as opposed to you're going to do what I say because I tell you. It's like, okay, this is why I think that this priority list makes sense, and I'm going to explain this with data, because we are all aspiring STEM and STEAM students. We all want to be problem solvers, and the problem solvers of the future have to come armed with data. We cannot be making decisions just based on emotion. So you have to explain mathematically why these things are valuable. You have to explain showing the research that you've done and what past teams have done and have been successful with and haven't been successful with. You need to talk about the limitations of your own team and how the team's performed in past years. And when we've tried to do tasks similar to this, we have failed. And that's why we don't think this is the best idea at this point. We think it's too big of a leap for us, you know? You have to come with data and come with arguments based on evidence. As opposed to when you become the dictator is when you get frustrated that discussion's not going well. So you're like, well, I'm the leader and I've been around the longest, so this is what we're doing. Because even if people agree at that point, because they just want to stop arguing, they are disincentivized to produce future ideas. And the best FRC teams have lots of brilliant minds on them. And if you have disenfranchised minds who are not providing ideas, your team is missing out. And your team is not capitalizing on what you have. And so that's why it's really important. Like one of the things I always talk about in 1114 is I said, no more silos. No more private conversations between two people. If you have an idea, post it for everyone. Because your idea may spark other ideas. And if we never hear that idea, it is lost. So like, don't just like have a conversation with your friend and then she's like, well, that's terrible, it makes no sense, let's just not, don't even bring it up, and then it never gets brought up. Because that idea might be the idea that may even be terrible now, but turns into and evolves into something. So I think it's just kind of important to like foster ideas, make sure the discussion happens, make sure you hear why they're saying things, and try and show them with data and arguments. But let's not appeal to authority, and let's not rely on emotions. That's a whole other topic. But it's a valuable life lesson. Hi.
Hey, so when it comes to creating your list for teams that you're going to pick in the finals, our team normally tries to like come up with a list of like the top 24 robots or so that we would want to pick in order. How, or what would your advice be about prioritizing, like, this is what is the number one robot based off of this, and this criteria, and then going down and building exactly where those teams fall?
So what I like to look at is I like to look at my own robot and see what I need to complement my robot and my team to provide a successful alliance. So this year, for most teams, I think right away you want the robot. So if you have a level 3 climb, you are looking at the robot that is going to cycle the most and get you the most points that way to complement your cycling, and you're not going to worry about what their climb does. If you don't have a level 3 climb, you want to look at cycling, but you want to also factor in the extra 12 points that can come from a level 3 climb. You may not pick one, you also want to think about compatibility. Can I fit 2 robots onto level 3? What about, do I like the right side of the field or the left side? Is there a cargo? Do I prefer cargo? Do I prefer panels? You know, that sort of thing. For second round picks this year, we've mainly been looking for robots that can play defense, but they can't just play defense. I want to maximize the ceiling for our matches, and maximizing the ceiling involves a robot that can start on level 2, a robot that can finish on level 2, and a robot that can do a panel in Sandstorm on the cargo ship. But your team may want a panel on the rocket. For example, if you want, if you can do one panel on the front side of the rocket, or on the back side of the rocket, and you can get one team who can do a panel on the front side, then you can start going cargo right away. You've got to look to see what's going to be compatible with the strategy you want to run. So there's not like this criteria. It's specific to the game and it's specific to your robots and specific to the strategies that you want to play.
Okay. So when it comes time, when you know that you have to use 2 offense and 1 defense, what values do you emphasize on for choosing that defense spot, especially when you have an alliance where you don't have any like specialized defense spots or they've never played defense before?
Number 1, I look at their drivetrain. I want a drivetrain that is not going to fall apart. The rigidity of it, because they're playing defense, they're slamming into them. Bumper construction, how are the bumpers mounted? If a bumper falls off, that robot gets disabled. And that could be the disaster among all disasters. I look at the number of motors in their drivetrain. I love teams with Neos this year. The Neos just give you that extra punch and extra power. I look at teams that scored well, because if they scored well, they probably were driven well. And if they were driven well, they can probably play defense well. One thing that we look at a lot, which is hard to measure, drive coaches we trust. That we can tell the drive coach exactly where we want them to be, and they will make sure their robot is there. So if we say we want them defending the backside of the rocket, they will stay on the backside of the rocket. And so this is one, and I will ruffle feathers here, this is one where we prefer an adult drive coach that we know, because that's someone who's been around and we can trust them.
So a quick follow-up, so you mentioned like if they can score well, they probably have a good drivetrain and you might want to look into that. But do you weigh that opportunity of them scoring that amount of points over defense?
This goes back to the 3 offense versus 2 offense and 1 defense. But like I'm looking at it from the context of if I know I want the robot to play defense, I'm picking them to play defense. So like I may pick a robot that is, but I also need to know that they want to play defense. And we'll talk to them before. We see at Ontario Provincials, Team 865, one of the better scoring offensive bots at their district events, but by provincials, it kind of fallen, they were like, it was tough in their division. And they came to us and said, hey, we've been scoring all year, we haven't played any D, but you've seen us drive, and you've seen this drivetrain, and you've seen us yeet up to level 2, like we'll play D for you, and we're ready for it. And I was just like, sign them up, put them on the D list. Like, this is great, because I love how this robot is driven all year with their fast scoring, and their drive coach is a student, but we've been to 3 events with them at this point. We're like, we trust them, so. But at that point, we had no intention of using them to score. They ended up being picked too early. We still wouldn't pick 7-1 anyways.
So I came from a team, I've changed teams this year as a junior, but my first 2 years in first, it was a team with a lot of resources, a lot of money, a lot of tools, a CNC mill, and they were the 36th lowest ELO ranked team in the entire country, and this year they placed as the last team in our entire district, only above a team that only managed to go to 1 competition. But then next year I was on a team that had a couple broken drills, a broken drill press, and a broken bandsaw, and somehow we managed to place 13th at our district championships. But we still, as a team, and personally, I feel like we're losing a lot of potential, given how well we did with almost no resources and no money and no support from the school. I feel like we're losing a lot of potential to our lack of resources. And I just don't know how to overcome that potential, and I don't know if you have any advice you could provide.
So I will say this. The first robotics competition is the best high school extracurricular experience out there. It's also one of the most expensive high school extracurricular experiences out there. So it is hard to conjure more resources. If you feel that you are being held back by your resources now, and like you've maximized everything within those resources, the only thing I can say is it's time to try and find more resources. Money is the hard one to find. However, your team is going to progress year after year. It's keeping alumni back in the fold. Finding other people in your community who have done first before as high school students, who are maybe in university now looking for a new team or whatever, trying to recruit them your way. Also, next year should be good. It should be good for teams with less resources, with the bag going away. The upper elite is going to get even more crazy, but that shouldn't affect your goals and such. And having more time on that robot is going to be good for you. So that's going to help a bit, but it's going to help everyone. So like the floor is being raised, and not like you're the only one without a bag. Other thing is to look for local sponsors who can do some machining for you, that sort of things. Fundraising is something I am not good at. I'm terrible at asking for money, probably because my parents just said no all the time. Parents, what can I say? Yeah, I don't really have a good answer for you for that, but I would start probing around, and experience is something you can develop. You can't just develop money, you can't plant a tree for that, but you're developing experience right now by being at this presentation. Anyone else have any questions? Hey.
What do you think is the best strategy in terms of like moving as a defender or against a defender?
So, as a defender, this year I think you can play robot on robot defense or you can play zone. I think zone defense is easier to play because you're not chasing ever. You can just cut off a section of the field. However, if you're against a good alliance, like even if you cut off a section of the field this year and they go to the other side, then they're choking up the other side with two robots there. That's why I like zone defense. Zone defense is hard to play for one reason, is that drivers get bored and they want to chase. And telling them to just sit in a lane, they'll feel really stupid. Like they shouldn't be sitting there, they shouldn't be sitting there. And then they will go chase. And then all of a sudden 2056 is filled the rocket. So robot on robot defense is great because drivers have a target and they like having a target and something to focus on. However, most of the time, if you're playing robot against robot defense against a good team, you will end up chasing them around. So what I say is, if you're playing robot on robot D, the first thing you need to do is to look to see what that robot is carrying. If they're carrying nothing, you need to be heading to the loading station because that's where they're going. If they are carrying a panel, you need to look to see the open spots and head to that position. If they're carrying a ball, look for the open spots and get to that position. You want to always go where the offensive robot is going. You don't want to go to the offensive robot. So that is the key. That's the lesson I gave 771 at Humber, and they took it to heart. And there's other things you can do. You can try and trap someone on the backside of the rocket. I think that most teams will get around it though, so it's not as effective. But I think for a team, if you're trying to get a team to play defense who hasn't played any defense at all, getting them to play zone defense is the easiest, but no, they'll run away at some point. They will get bored. If you've got a defender who's played a little bit of defense, then try having them play robot on robot defense. And let's kill the term man-on-man defense. It's such a gendered term. It's so dumb. So it's robots. It's robot on robot defense. Let's try and kill that term. I've been trying that all year long. It's starting to work. Any other questions?
So scouting this year we started with an application that has been starting to work at our Shepherd district. It worked very well. But at our district event, no, not our district event, our district championship, we had problems with not enough people either scouting or showing up to scout. How do you get people to really be enthusiastic about scouting?
That's a hard one. So number one, it's culture on your team. If scouting is rewarded and revered, people are going to be more likely to do it. Data has to be appreciated. The data has to be valued. It can't just be an afterthought. And in high school, kids gravitate to certain kids. Those kids that the kids gravitate towards hopefully are the leaders on your team. Because if they are, they're going to gravitate to the examples the leader set. If the leader set an example that scouting is important, and if the leader may say, hey, I'm going to be on the scouting team this event, I'm not going to be in the pit crew or whatever, that'll go a long, long way. If you don't have leaders that are respected, then you have a bigger problem. I see on a lot of FRC teams, mentors in this program choose kids to be leaders that remind them of themselves. Except the mentors in this program may not be the most socially adept people. And so they get kids like them who are not respected in a high school setting. And so at that point, whatever message leadership's trying to push is going to fall on deaf ears. A big part of leadership is charisma. There is a reason Americans loved JFK, and it was not his policy, but it was his charisma. And there was a reason Barack Obama was able to overcome so many stereotypes and preconceived biases. It was his charisma. And so that stuff matters. And so, again, it's about having a team that where a culture respects scouting, and the people that are respected on the team have to respect scouting. There's no easy solution to this one. For some people, they see scouting and they just see it as boring. They see it as a waste of time because it's not tangible like the robot. So they don't see the value it has into winning matches. Lots of teams will think their stupid tennis racket intake is more important than scouting. Guess what? The scouting is going to do way more for you than that tennis racket intake.
Is there a team that did that?
Pardon?
Is there a team that did that?
There are plenty of teams who do that. Pinchy, pinchy. Ever since the COTS revolution with Vex Pro and Andy Mark and now Rev, more and more teams understand that rollers are the best way to acquire game pieces. There's still always going to be some pinchy, pinchy, but anything else? Yeah.
So I have 3 questions.
Okay.
My first question is essentially kind of like a pickless question, but it's
Sure.
more on like the students' mentor side of things. So sometimes my mentors are like, they rely completely on me to decide what we're going to do. But other times it's like, I'm not even relevant and they don't ask me. What is a good balance that it should be about?
It should be about consensus. And we talked about this with design. I am a big proponent that teams should run however they want to run. And I definitely think that the first robotics competition should involve mentors. And so I'm totally okay if mentors are making decisions on teams. However, if mentors are making decisions without even consulting students who want to be consulted, dangerous. Because what are the kids getting out of the process? At the same time, if students are making decisions without consulting mentors who have a lot of experience, why is the mentor there? Does she want to come back anymore after that? I don't know. I think it needs to be collaborative. But if you're feeling left out, and you said some key words there, that you were feeling left out and like they don't even care, it's not a good sign. Why do you want to be on a team where people don't care about what you have to say? So that's a balance that isn't working. I can't tell you where the balance point is for any team. But I can say that it's important to have a balance point. And the balance point should always involve the students on the team. Because why are we doing this if it isn't for the students? We're not just here to play with robots. Adults could do a lot more fun stuff playing with robots. Go have a BattleBots team. It's not that hard to get in anymore, trust me.
Okay.
Seriously, everyone has a BattleBots team now. It's kind of crazy.
And my second question is sort of regarding, so I want to essentially like, I want to have my scouts also have like an input on, what essentially an input on me where I would look. Now, I do understand like looking at data is key, but I also want to have my scouters like sort of give me an idea what I should look at a bit more carefully. Because like sometimes data doesn't explain the entire story.
Right.
But there are also times like it's a bit odd to do so. So what would be like, essentially, is it okay to do that?
Is it okay to
Consult my scouters?
Absolutely. So like you got to remember, the data does not tell the whole story, like you just said. And your scouts have eyes, and they will have other comments and whatever. And it's important to get those comments and get that feedback. I don't want scouts to have to write down every thought they have. And some will like that. If some want to maintain a journal or whatever to refresh their memory, that's cool or whatever. But like it's important at the scouting meeting to have all the scouts there and talk to them and be like, okay, so what, especially when you're coming down to like who you're going to pick. And like you're trying to choose who's going to be number one on your list. It's like, what do you think about this team? And what was like, did you see anything else on the field, you know? I love to talk to our drive team about what they think of other teams. Because what would they like to work with? Like at this core, this is a game of personalities. So even if a team is scoring like crazy, if they were a pain to work with in the driver's station, they're going to drop down the list. Because it's like, it's about compatibility. And like, how are you going to optimize what you are doing? So always talk to your scouts. You said you had 3 questions.
The third question is a bit weird.
Sure.
So
we're here.
So it's kind of like, I hate it, but at the same time, it's like important. It's about team politics. Team politics.
Ugh, yeah,
Yeah.
I can already tell I don't gonna like this one.
So I usually go for the team that I think is going to complement our team the best and will work well with us and will help us do the best of the competition. Though my mentors sometimes believe that they should work with a team that can do well, but also fits in with would better our relationship.
I will say that is a team by team decision. I can't, your mentors may have reasons for that, and there may be complicated reasons for that, and I don't know those. I can't, I would say I would always love to pick the team who gives us the best chance of winning, but I understand that there are often other factors at play. Hi.
So I have a question about field coaching.
Sure.
So first thing is when you're strategizing with another team who are insistent about a certain strategy that you know will not be the best course of action, how do you deal with that situation?
It's hard because when we've spent a lot of time talking about consensus building, and consensus building is much easier to do with people you know. So when you were dealing with the drive coach that you've never met before maybe or only see twice a year, it's hard. But we are STEAM problem solvers of the future. So we are going to come to every argument armed with data and evidence. And so having good scouting data, which says, no, this strategy doesn't make sense. It makes more sense to defend team A because our data shows that they lose about 6 cycles when defended, while this other team only loses 2 cycles. Having data that you can show them can be very convincing. And it's hard to ignore that sort of stuff. Show them evidence. Pull out a tablet. Hey, take a look at the last time that someone played defense on this team. They still scored through it. But look at evidence and data. It is hard to win some of these personalities. Are you a drive coach for your team? How old are you?
16.
You're fighting an uphill battle. You are 16 years old. You are a woman in this program, a young woman. And you are dealing with drive coaches. And in your area, some of them are like 50 years old. They've been drive coaching forever. And they will automatically assume they're smarter than you. And that's their weakness. Because I just met you, I'm not going to assume anything about you. Most people probably wouldn't have even assumed you were the drive coach. I'm sure you get that a lot. They think you're the human player or there to wave the flag or something. So that you're fighting an uphill battle. I won't lie to you, and that's part of the struggle that many of us have from being from different backgrounds and that sort of thing. So come with things that they can discount you for how you look, but it's going to be harder for them to discount the data that you bring. And also, do not lose confidence in yourself. If you get ignored, if they discourage you or whatever, remember that you know what you're doing. You came to this presentation for some reason today. You wanted to learn, obviously, and that gives you a leg up on a lot of these people. So remember that you are good at this, and you are capable, and your team has had success, and don't forget that. And think about what successes those teams have had. Sometimes you might be dealing with an adult mentor who has reason to have a little bit behind them. Other times they may not have reasons whatsoever, and you've got to look at the evidence and go into with that. But I say the number one key in any sort of negotiation is confidence and coming in there believing in yourself. And also, it's not, I think this is the best course of action, or we believe, we feel, this is the best course of action based on the data that we've collected. We'd love to hear your opinions on it, and we want to come up with a strategy that's going to work for you, but we have data and evidence that shows that this is the best way of doing things. Now, I've told you a lot about being confident. There's a line. You never want to be cocky. So you do want to always work because I've seen a lot of young drive coaches who are so focused on trying to assert power and assert dominance, they cross the line. And I'm not saying that you would or anything like that, but it can happen. So you want to toe that line. But I think right now the important thing is, it doesn't matter that you're 16. I started as a drive coach when I was 16 as well. And at that point I was like 5'6" and like 85 pounds and whatever. And we were the only Canadian team, and people didn't want to hear from me either. But I had to believe in myself, and I had to remember what I was good at, and what I was good at was first robotics, and I think you are too. So.
Okay. Another thing, when you have a pre-developed strategy and it's good, you have backups just in case, and you go into a match and it's abandoned immediately. How do you adjust to that?
You got to think. Well, first of all, once it's abandoned, it's hard. Your partner at that point, it is hard enough to control your own drive team. It is you can't control the other ones. Trying to get the train back on the tracks. This is like a train. It's heavy. It is off the tracks. It is time to triage and figure out what you can do. So think of your own backups and work with that. See if the strategy is falling apart because of one team or both teams. And if it's only falling apart because of one team, you may have to ignore them and go with the other one. I've lived this one so many times. You go in there, you have a great plan, and then the other team's just like, what are you doing? Like this year especially. You take one rocket cargo, we take one, and it's like, why are you over on our side of the field? What are you doing here now? But that conversation is not useful in that place. If they are in your way, switch sides if you have to. Like you have to have that contingency and understand that they aren't going to listen. And there's a lot of times when you're developing a match strategy where a team will say all the right things, and they are not. They have no intention of doing what you're saying. And it's also very important to attune your senses, and this is like a life skill, to when people are lying, and be prepared, and be, so like, there's many times where I've done match strategy with 11-14, and other teams listen, I go to our drive coach, I go, hey, this may all explode 10 seconds into the match. I got a weird feeling, and it's just, so they're ready. So you need to, there's some matches where you're gonna know you don't need to be ready, there's other matches where you just got that feeling. Trust your gut, be confident in yourself, and you feel like, oh yeah, they weren't really listening. You know what the difference between someone's hearing you and listening to you? If they were just hearing you, that's a good sign of, okay, we need to be ready. But it sucks. I don't have a good one there. Anything else?
Yeah.
Okay.
With Thrive Team, since you're going to be with people that aren't experienced at all and are a little bit jumpy.
Yep.
How would you handle the communication between the driver and the operator and the team player and just making that fit better for a team that's not?
So the number one thing is communication is what matters on a drive team. That is more important than ability to play video games or all that nonsense or whatever. If you know who you're going to be working with early, it's about developing a rapport. And like you can do that, everyone's going to say, oh, go to a bunch of off-season events, whatever. Spend time with them. Sit with them in the cafeteria at lunch. They may be freshmen, you may not want to sit with them. But sit with them, get to know them, get to know what makes them tick, know what each other's interests are. The best drive teams are the ones who are completing each other's sentences. You know, and like it's crazy because like you can even have that with adult drive coaches, you know, like a 50-year-old dude and like a 16-year-old girl, and you can have that same sort of rapport, but it's about spending time together and developing that. And I'm not saying you have to be best friends, because people are people. Some people get along, some people don't. But it is important that you learn each other's patterns and predictability, and nonverbal communication is important as well, and you can tell when something's bothering them, and respect. As the drive coach, they need to respect you absolutely, because they have to listen to what you're going to say, because if they don't listen to what you're going to say, they're missing out, because you can see the whole field and they're focused on the robot. So it's important that they respect your abilities as a leader and as a decision maker. I hope that helps.
Yeah.
Those are all tough questions. Not as easy as how do you calculate OPR, but awesome. I do need to get going. Any other questions, guys? A food question? Oh, okay. You can see where my head is right now.
So we're a type of team where we can get really close to finishing a rocket, but most of the cases we can't finish a rocket. So some teams want to work with us, but most of the time we get in each other's way and don't finish.
What's your auto mode right now?
What?
What's your rocket auto mode like? Two panels, one panel?
One panel.
Front side?
Go to the team player two.
Okay. So if you were sending a team to play defense, what I recommend is you tell them to not score their panel in Sandstorm if you really want the Rocket RP that match. And if you really want the Rocket RP, you better win that match. So, because we're foregoing a panel on the cargo ship at this point. on their way to play defense, they should go to the backside of your rocket and score that one panel on the backside of the rocket. That one panel on the backside cuts down your rocket time significantly because the backside is the hardest for all teams to score. One of the things, so like, backside is the hardest. So getting that one panel and then out of the way to play defense. Like if they're going to play defense already and they have the panel and they're capable of scoring it, have them put it there. That will reduce your rocket time a lot. I think you got to look at your own team's abilities and figure out what you're good at, cargo, panels, or whatever. If you can't finish the rocket on your own, you may, if like for example, if you're considerably better at cargo, you should target, say, one team's going to do one backside. I want our other partner to do 3 panels, mid and low, and then we're going to come in and finish the rest. Leave yourself an attainable goal when you're not both going in there. Having both teams working on it at the same time is beautiful when it works, but it's just really hard. So it's about figuring out what you're best at and doing that, and figuring out what your partners are best at and having them do that and have it hopefully happen at different times in the match.
Also, so we're also the type of robot where we're really good when we don't have defense against us.
Yep.
So when we have defense, we can get lucky sometimes, but sometimes we get really unlucky and we drop to like scoring 20% of the game pieces we normally score.
So I would say the most important, if you recognize that right now, that means you're not finishing a rocket under D, right? When the D comes, abandon the rocket and go to the cargo ship. And because the worst is when teams just keep trying to score panels on a rocket they're never going to finish, and they're losing a point per cycle, and point per cycle matters. So when the defense comes, bail on the rocket, get ready to attack the cargo ship, and then maybe the defense leaves, and then you can start using the cargo ship again. Anything else, guys?
I had a question about how your philosophy on like taking failure and using it to like optimize not only how like a robot performs, but how a team performs in the future.
I mean, I believe that success is more inspiring, but there are more learning opportunities associated with failure if you handle failure correctly. I think it's important to understand in competition that failure is expected because, I mean, every team's going to have goals, and most teams' goals are going to be to win the event, and only a few teams are going to win the event. So failure is something we have to embrace in this program. It is intrinsically part of the first experience. Everyone fails at some point. And so that has to be the number one thing, that failure can't get you too down. You should be upset when you lose because you had a goal and you didn't achieve it. It would be crazy if you didn't feel that emotionally or something. But when I say you should be upset, it doesn't mean you should be having a tantrum or whatever. I think it's okay for everyone to have 30 minutes after they lose. I think that's like a good number, just to sulk and be frustrated and want to be on their own. But after that, and it can still linger, the pain can still linger, that's fine. But after that, you need to be able to suck it up and enjoy the competition and show off energy and be a good teammate to your team, to everyone, and to respect the opponents who beat you. That you're not sulking or whatever, then you can go and congratulate them about what just happened. Because it's important that we celebrate whoever succeeds in this program, whether it's us or it's someone else. But then I dislike how a lot of people are just like, okay, well, we failed, just forget about it and let's move on to the next one. Wrong answer. We need to look at our failures and figure out why they happened and be honest about them. Never be the team who always has an excuse. Oh, it was lag. Oh, it was the match schedule. Don't be that. Sometimes it is lag. Sometimes it is the match schedule. But if it's always something, then you need to be able to look at things and say, what did we do wrong? Even if the match schedule was terrible and we had lag and we had the worst head referee and our inspector gave us a 2-hour inspection, which happens at this event because inspectors are terrible. But it's important for you to forget about all that stuff and say, what could we have done better? Because in the first robotics competition, you will always be a victim of something. You cannot control all that stuff, so we need to focus on what we can control and how we can improve it. So that's my thing, is to look at our failures, throw out the noise, and figure out what we could have done better. And also, we need to do the same things when we succeed, because sometimes in first, we get lucky. We have a great match schedule, or we're really fortunate. And if you don't look at those things, you will come in overconfident. I'll say at the Ontario Provincial Championship, 11-14 had a string of good luck. And for us to come in here and just be like, oh, we're better than 2056, we know we are, would be foolish, because their partner died in match one of the finals. because their breaker got hit by a panel. It would be silly for us to just think that it was a walkover, you know? And even though it doesn't demean your success, there's nothing worse than when a team comes up and is like, oh, you only won because you're lucky. That is so insulting. Everyone's lucky in first. Like, you cannot win. Your match schedule is completely random. But at the same time, if you don't recognize your own good fortune, you will become overconfident. And it's a thing. You're welcome. All right, I'm going to call it because the Curie match schedule just dropped and I need to.
Oh no.